Hello, everybody. My name is Dan, though I don't know if I'll continue to use my real name. But this is a new segment I'm going to be trying called Storytime, where I go over many of the stories that I have in my head and a lot of the characters that I have in my head, and I just put them out here for others to hear and have a good record of them. And I'm going to start with the highest of the orders that I have, which are the Elements of Eternity. So, Elements of Eternity are a group that can span well into a lot of the characters that I've created. It is a certain hierarchy of characters of immense power, which can be used as a driving force for a lot of the stories and characters, motivations, and things like that. So, Elements of Eternity. Best way to start it off is to say that in my story, in my universe, God no longer exists in a singular form, but is instead dispersed through the elements of eternity. The elements of eternity, easily as best described, can probably be considered demigods. They are immortal beings, each of which corresponds with a specific element, hence the name. However, this is not going off of the main element, earth, fire, wind, water, or the Chinese ones, which involve metal and wood. This incorporates all forms of energy and matter and things like that. Obviously, earth, fire, wind, and water is covered, but as well as time, fate, martial arts, current, weaponry, electricity, sound, even the senses, eyesight, hearing, touch, taste, smell, things like that. Each one has a specific corresponding element of eternity, which their job is to govern their element and maintain harmony and balance in the world or worlds, depending on how I decide the story will go. There's only one. Basically, every element of eternity is considered a guardian of that element. So, at one time, there can only be one element. However, it can be passed down to others as a legacy. In doing that, the original element of eternity loses most of its immortality and its powers, and it takes a step back. It will continue to live on, however, its function and things they can do is severely diminished to the point they could be considered like Buddhas, where they would not move and they just stand around, being able to disperse wisdom and things like that. However, if you are the oldest of that element's guardian specifically, if you are the oldest of that one, you are known as the primordial element, which is far more powerful than just someone who has taken up the mantle but still has their mentor, as it were, still around to be able to be talked to. So basically, if you have the power but you are not the primordial, you control the element. But if you are the primordial, you are that element. And there are certain benefits and banes, I guess, to being a primordial or just being a guardian. So if there are many worlds, the element can travel to many worlds, and when it takes to that world, whatever is considered the strongest, most powerful, or has the most potential, whatever creature that is, they will take the form of that creature at its strongest, along with the element that it governs. So, an element of eternity for the wind will have complete mastery over wind, fire for fire, earth for earth, things like that. I already mentioned those. So basically, like I said, they try and maintain harmony and balance, and that it falls through a class system of sorts. The highest of the primordials, the highest of the elements of eternity is the element of eternity of fate, known as eternal. Eternal will see a crisis that will happen, and it will tell it down to its next in line, which is Apakis, the element of eternity for time. And that element will go to whichever element that he sees deemed fit to deal with the crisis at hand, tell them, you are tasked, go deal with it. And that element of eternity now has its task to go deal with whatever problems out there, and until then, once it deals with it, until the next task is dealt, they are allowed to live their immortal lives however they please. And each one has their own personality and quirks, so each one has their own story that they can tell. And because of that, everything that happens can be easily dispersed into other characters and other storylines if they feel they need to pick guard champions or things like that. They can pull them out of anywhere at any time and have them in a specific area to deal with a crisis. I've had a number of crises that I've made, which I'll go into sometime down the line. So that is the Elements of Eternity. A buffer for future installments. Things that the Elements of Eternity deal with are Remnicites and those who are touched by an element. So we'll start with Remnicites. Remnicites are essentially parasites that exist and feed off of a specific element. Whenever a certain element unleashes a large amount of energy, typhoon, hurricane, volcano, tsunami, earthquake, whenever a large amount of energy is unleashed from a specific element, a Remnicite will manifest and start to feed off of that energy until it disperses. So basically, the Remnicite becomes the timer for a large amount of energy until it goes away. And once that happens, after the energy is calm, depending on how much of the energy has been consumed by the Remnicite, it can either disperse because it wasn't able to absorb enough to hold a physical form, or if it has, it will keep its shape and the consumed energy, and then it will just basically be able to cause natural disasters or major problems until it's located and dealt with by an Element of Eternity, because they'll be able to feel that it's there. So Remnicites can be both a blessing and a curse depending on the situation at hand. Now, to be touched by an element. This one is one of the bigger things that will incorporate a lot of characters and can even be taken out of my stories and put into others. So, at a moment of peril or extreme circumstances, one can be touched by an Element of Eternity. What that basically means is if an Element of Eternity sees their dire straits and deems them worthy, they can choose to allow the element to bestow them with abilities. Or, in a less than fortunate role, they can instead be attached to a Remnicite. A Remnicite in that specific area can become attracted to moments of extreme peril. And any energy that Remnicite has consumed will then be bestowed onto the person in peril. Either method will imbue the individual with a specific control over the element that they were touched. So, a person who in extreme peril touched by fire can use fire, or can use flames in a specific way. You can be touched by more than one element. Say, if you're touched by the element of fire and ice, then you can control fire and ice, or maybe you can control the temperatures of something. You can lower or raise the temperatures easily, or anything like that. Just because you're touched by an element doesn't mean you have complete mastery over that element. It could be a specific thing of that element. You can be touched by the Element of Eternity of Current, which controls energy flow back and forth. So instead of being able to control energy flow, maybe you just are now able to see energy flows and you see how everything moves, and you're able to predict things before they hit because you can see the energy flowing in that specific way. So the reason why I say you can take this and incorporate it into other stories is, best example, things like Avatar: The Last Airbender, Earthbender, Firebender, Waterbender, Airbender. If you don't want to follow their mythos, you can just say, well, all these people were touched by an Element of Eternity for fire, earth, wind, water. The Avatar was touched by all four. It's an easy way of explaining why someone has an ability. And it makes storytelling much easier if you feel like taking this character and saying, well, I want there to be a reason for why this person has a specific power, there you go. It's because an element of eternity saw them in a moment of extreme crisis or peril. It could be anything, really. It could be, their difficulty in childbirth. Sometimes it doesn't matter what the specific reason is. And, depending on the person who takes upon that power, they could use it for good, bad, neither, just remain to themselves. And okay, so that is all I have right now for Elements of Eternity. I will make videos later for other characters. The next one will probably be the element of eternity that I have fleshed out the most at this point, which would probably be Mythos, which is the element of eternity for wind. So until then, I'd appreciate any feedback, maybe like a name for the characters that I'm portraying. I'm thinking story time, but I'm not sure if I'm going to stay with that. If you have any questions about any of the things, feel free to leave a comment and ask, and I will immediately, or as soon as possible, I will respond. I will try and respond to any comments I get, and I will appreciate any feedback or criticisms, any of them. So until then, thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoy the characters and soon the things I will soon be bringing out.